Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today we're going to go over 6 houseplants that I would consider to be essential when trying to achieve those classic ethereal boho vibes. So I guess one could say these plants will turn your boho house into a boho home. I'm so sorry. So the first one I'm going to talk about today is probably the most ethereal of all houseplants, and that is ferns. Oh, goodness, me and ferns have such an interesting relationship, as many of you probably know if you watch me here on YouTube. I love ferns. They have such an incredible vibe. They are the most boho, like woodlandish vibe plant that I can think of out of like all of the houseplants. They really do have such an incredible presence, and there is such a vast variety of ferns in existence that you could have practically just ferns in your home, and you could have like 100 different houseplants. This one in particular is a little bit newer to me. This practically looks fake. This isn't a splenium, so this is very closely related to a bird's nest fern, and it has like a stupid name. It's a cross. I think it's like Asplenium, like dimorphum cross diform. I don't know. I'll put it on screen, of course. But I fell in love with it because it looks literally fake. And when I found out it's an Asplenium, that gave me a little bit more hope because there are a lot of ferns out there. If you are an indoor gardener, I'm sure you have brought home some ferns in the past. Maybe a Boston fern or a button fern or a heart fern, for example, and it maybe died within a week on you, or a maidenhair fern is probably the prime example. As beautiful as they are a little bit more finicky. So myself, I tend to lean more towards the hardier fern varieties, the ones that have thicker foliage that aren't going to just completely die on me if I forget to water them after just like 2 or 3 days. So that's why I figured I'd give this one a go, because if you are familiar with bird's nest ferns, they are very thick ferns, and as frilly of a fern as this looks, its foliage is actually much thicker than many of the ferns that I'm used to. So one reason why I wanted to try this one out, but I've only had this one for about a month's time, so who's to say? I just wanted to feature it today because I'm not going to be doing a houseplant haul on it. Also, another fern example, also pretty new to me as well, is this Japanese holly fern. This is a Sertomium. I forget the full name of this. But this is a very hardy fern as well. Also has very thick foliage, one that can withstand a little bit more drought. I fell in love with this when I went to Florida a couple months ago, and this was used as ground cover in a lot of the shaded areas. So I figured, why not give it a go when I got home? So yeah, a really beautiful fern. You can see a new frond coming in right here. That's looking fantastic. So definitely another hardy fern, but my secret to keeping my ferns alive is keeping them in vicinities close to where water will be, whether it's a sink or a cup of water, maybe the coffee table or my nightstand, where I'm often going to have just cups of water that I can dump in willy-nilly if I realize I forgot to water the fern. So a tip for you there. I'm experimenting right now with keeping most of my newer ferns inside their plastic planter because I just feel like plastic holds on to moisture much better, and the secret to keeping your ferns alive is keeping them moist. A couple more examples of some hardier ferns that I really enjoy are the kangaroo paw fern, the crocodile fern, blue star fern, the staghorn fern. A staghorn fern is like the epitome of like boho houseplants. I should have included it in today's lineup, but I did not, so of course I will include a little footage of it on screen. But I also did want to lump into this fern category asparagus plants. So this is an asparagus fern, as it's commonly referred to. It's truly an asparagus, but if you walk into any houseplant store, I feel quite confident you're going to find this amongst the fern selection, as it really does just give off such fern-like vibes. And this is a very thin specimen, let's say. I cut this one back recently, as these respond very, very well to being cut back if maybe you forget to water them for a little while and some of the fronds turn yellow, which is often in my case, so I just cut it back and it's regrowing. You're often going to see them much fuller, and you can see how lush they look, and they give you just such like woodlandish northeastern vibes. It's really quite fantastic. There are a bunch of other varieties of asparagus out there too. I just feel like this Asparagus plumosa or Asparagus cetaceus, I forget what the exact name is going to be one of the ones that just fits the bill the most. So really wanted to spotlight this one today, but of course this is a little bit of a wimpier example. But asparagus ferns are a must for a boho home. The next one I want to talk about today is another one that's going to be quite common in your houseplant stores. So this is Schefflera, and this is just a very small specimen today because it's the smallest one that I have to share with you guys. But this one right here is Schefflera arboricola dazzle. So this is just a smaller leafed Schefflera. This one has some nice variegation to it. It's a little bit different than the classic variegation that you're going to see on many of the ones that you see in the store. So just a little bit of a different version, but really not that different in my opinion. But whether it's a small leaf Schefflera or a large leaf Schefflera, I think these as specimen plants really do give off such a boho vibe. Some of them do have a little bit more tropical vibes, I will say. I feel like the more pruned ones, in my opinion, give off more tropical vibes, but ones that are just kind of left to grow like willy-nilly, like this one here, or my Schefflera Actinophylla nova, which is one of my favorite houseplants, I really do feel like these just give off such woodlandish vibes that I am just such a big fan of. Not to mention Schefflera are very, very easy houseplants to grow. They are one of the easiest ones to grow in my opinion. There's a reason why Schefflera Actinophylla and Schefflera arboricola are such common houseplants on the market. They do very, very well in bright indirect light areas. They can take a little bit of direct sunlight. I've been growing this one underneath the grow light, for example, and then my Nova has also been under a grow light for some time, but I just recently moved it to an east-facing window, and it's been doing phenomenally. So ones that will do great in the, the medium, brighter light indirect areas in your home, but they're very easy to get your hands on. If you walk into any big box store, I can guarantee you they're going to have at least like 2 or 3 varieties of Schefflera to pick from. Usually in bushes, but you're often going to also see them as like trained braids or trees, which I said kind of give me more of like a tropical vibe in my opinion, but it's up to you. The world is your oyster. You can pick whatever you want, but I just think that a Schefflera is a very common plant that's going to be kind of passed over most often. I feel like most people probably walk into their houseplant stores and just walk right by these plants without noticing them when they're looking for a new houseplant, but I still think they deserve just as much love as all the other houseplants. But speaking of plants that I think get kind of just waltzed right past, I think another one that really fits the bill today is Dracaena. So this is a Dracaena Reflexa. This is the one I feel like I always talk about whenever I am talking about Dracaena here on YouTube, but that is simply because this is the only small Dracaena that I have. All of my other ones are tree specimens, and I think that Dracaena are such incredible, like large specimens for a boho vibe. Once again, there are some varieties that I think can give off more tropical vibes. Think like a standard corn plant, a Dracaena fragrans. If you walk into a big box store or IKEA, they're going to have these. They're going to be like 6 feet tall. They're going to have these thick, woody trunks with these large strappy leaves with that bright green variegation down the center, and those really do give off quite a like Hawaiian vibe in my opinion. But many of the other varieties of Dracaena are the ones that kind of just like are the filler plants, but they're large plants. Like there's a reason why we walk right past them in the houseplant stores and don't really notice them, because they're kind of just like pieces that just blend in with the rest, which I really enjoy. So I think this Dracaena Reflexa is one of those, specifically this Dracaena Reflexa Song of Jamaica, and the plain green one, the Song of India, has much more tropical nuances with that bright yellow foliage if you guys are familiar. Still a fantastic houseplant by all means. I would say that the plants that are less variegated or have less color are going to give you more of that woodlandy vibe. So there are a bunch of Dracaenas as well that are going to sport the lemon lime color and white variegation. And all of them are fantastic and perfect filler plants, but if you're looking for a boho vibe, I would definitely go for one of the more plain green ones. Like I said, the Dracaena Reflexa is great. Dracaena Janet Craig is like one of my favorite filler plants. It's so incredible. I shouldn't be calling them filler plants as like knocking them down as things that just blend in, but they do just blend in, and that's really what I love about them. And not to mention, they're incredibly easy. They sometimes can cost a little bit more. Often when I would get the staggereds is what they're referred to as, when they're like 3 or 4 in a pot, and then like one of them's like 1 foot high, one of them's 2 foot high, one of them's like 3 foot high, you know what I'm talking about. Those can get pretty expensive when I would purchase them in as a buyer. But if you go to the right place, you can find them for a good deal. And rest assured, if you purchase one, it's not going to die. You can throw that thing in your shower like once a month and it's going to do pretty well, maybe even less than that. But they're very, very hardy houseplants. Specifically, the greener, the better, trust. And the next one I want to talk about is a plant that I've been an advocate for a couple of years. I'm a really big fan of these houseplants. So this is a Cissus. This one right here in particular is a Sissalis Rhombifolia. I feel like I've been talking about my Adenopoda a little too much lately, which is fantastic houseplant. I will flash it on screen one of my favorite houseplants, definitely my favorite Cissus if we're playing favorites. But I think the most tried and true Cissus is going to be the Sissalis Rhombifolia right here. And this is the oak leaf version, or the Elendanica is its name, I believe. There's also the grape leaf version, which is fantastic as well. They are both going to give you very similar vibes. I think the grape leaf version is going to give you more like English ivy vibes, while the oak leaf is going to give you more like, I don't know, like poison oak vibes. I think it's pretty true to the name. So these are plants that are going to trail for days if you allow them to, but they're also going to grab onto things and climb up as this one gets going. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts to grab onto this jute rope that's used to attach to this planter, which I think this planter is by Creative Co-op. I'm not sure, but I think they sell other stuff online if you were curious. But I did have to drill a hole in the bottom of it, I will say. But I do really enjoy this planter. But Cissus are just perfect houseplants for the brighter light areas in your home. I think like medium to, you know, bright and direct. If you put these in direct sunlight, I think they're definitely going to get a little bit more chlorotic with the color. But I have mine growing in my pretty unobstructed east-facing window, and this is like right in the window. And it doesn't seem to be frying the way that some of my other plants have fried in the window. So I think this can handle a little bit more sunlight. And there are a bunch of other varieties of Cissus out there, but some of them can get more on the succulent side, which still super cool. They're just going to give you less boho vibes. But there's also relatives to the Cissus, such as the tetrastigma, which is just like such a powerhouse of a woodlandish houseplant with just such large leaves. A little bit more of a difficult houseplant, I will admit. Mine's been hanging on for a couple of years. It puts off new growth, and then it stops growing that new growth, and then some of the older leaves die. It's a whole thing, but still, I would consider it a powerhouse of a boho houseplant. A little too big to hold on screen today, perhaps I will put on some footage, but the Cissus are the ones that are going to be the most accessible. If you walk into a local nursery, I'm sure they're probably going to have a small selection of Cissus, but they're not really houseplants that anybody's writing home about, unfortunately, so you're not always probably going to find these in stock, because I doubt all places are buying these in all the time. I get excited about them. It doesn't mean anybody else is going to get excited about them, but if you have tried growing like English ivy in your home, for example, which is not the most amazing houseplant in terms of its care and maintenance. I'm obsessed with the look of English ivy, do not get me wrong, but it can be a little bit more finicky. It's a little bit more attracted to pests, needs a little bit more light. I think Cissus is an excellent replacement plant, and you might even find yourself enjoying them a little bit more, as I do. The fifth one I'm going to talk about today is a classic. So this is Syndopsis Pictus. I believe that this variety in particular is a Silver Ann, but I'm going to lump all Syndopsis Pictus into this category today, but I'm not lumping in all pothos. I think that pothos in particular, like a golden pothos, is so much more like tropical in its essence, and it has much more of an aggressive vibe in the way that it's just like very upright and very just like in your face. I think that Syndopsis Pictus is so much more relaxed. It's so much more ethereal. In a way, I feel like it's a little bit more feminine too. So even though this is still a very tropical houseplant, by all means, all of the houseplants I'm talking about today are tropical houseplants, I still think this is going to give you much more of that like northeastern vibe. Hanging this up in the corner of a room or having this like draped down the side of a bookcase or something along those lines is really just going to give you a really, really relaxed, ethereal vibe, in my opinion. So this is a very, very easy houseplant to grow as well. I know mine looks a little ratty up top, but that's because I have put this thing through hell. I'm very neglectful when it comes to my Syndopsis Pictus, because I've learned that I can be. Of course, if I want to be the very best plant parent that I can be and leave this thing looking as full as possible up top, I could be a little bit more attentive, but as my houseplant starts to dry out, which it's dry at this moment, you can probably tell on some of this foliage up top, that the leaves are starting to curl in from the edge, and that's just its telltale sign to know when it's time to be watered. So this is perfect for a plant to be hanging up or just kind of out of sight, because you don't need to stick your finger in the soil to tell when it's time to water. And unlike a fern, if it's too dry, it's not just going to look completely crisped up and practically dead. This is just going to be a little wilted, I guess, and just curled, and you just give it a good drink or throw it in the shower or the sink or whatever you got to do, And within 6 hours to a day's time, I think this thing is practically going to be looking good as new, depending on how far on drought you let it go. But it's a very quick growing houseplant too. You can put this in the interior of your space and it's just still going to grow for what feels like miles and miles. It's one that you could probably like put up hooks along your ceiling and just like trail it along the ceiling or track it along wherever you want it to grow, and it will continue to grow. Of course, as this thing gets longer and longer, as I'd say, it approaches like 10 feet or so, sometimes you might get a little bit less foliage and it might start to put off a little bit more runners. But as this is a very active growing houseplant, anytime I get runners on this, I just cut them off. I don't normally do that with some of my more sought after aroids, but in this case, I just chop them off and I let it regrow, and it usually will put off a little bit more foliage. Maybe it's a fertilizer thing, I don't know, but that's just in my experience. I've grown out quite a few of these to be quite lengthy, and there does become a point where they stop putting off foliage, so just something to be aware of. But whether it's full on top or getting a little bit more bald and sparse, I still think that it really just gives me such that boho vibe that I'm looking for. And really one of the easiest houseplants out there. Like out of all the houseplants I'm talking about today, I would say, tied with Dracaena, I would say the easiest. And then the last one I'm going to be talking about today is such a fun one, and it's a very, very inexpensive houseplant that I just think it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So this is a Pilea right here, and this one in particular is a Pilea Grandifolia. This is like a prime example of a Pilea that's going to give you those woodlandish vibes, basically because this is a green Pilea. And I'm sure me saying Pilea, the first thing that's coming to your mind if you're more unfamiliar with these leafy Pileas is the Pilea peperomioides. I'm not talking about Pilea peperomioides today, but like practically every other Pilea in existence I'm talking about. So this one is just a very leafy green one, so it's giving you that very like herbaceous vibe, but there are plenty of other ones that are going to give you more like crack in the sidewalk weed vibes, like Pilea spruceanum that's going to have a little bit more color, or the Pilea cateri, for example. Also, there's Pilea depressa, which sounds so sad, but it's just a trailing Pilea, or the Pilea glaucophylla, for example, as well. Super incredible houseplants. There's a lot of variety within Pilea, so really quite an incredible houseplant that, like I said, very inexpensive. The one thing about Pilea, though, is they are a little bit more finicky in the sense of the watering and how they behave with under or over watering. So these like to be on the more moist side, but if you keep them too moist, of course, they're not going to react very well. And on the dry side, they're going to wilt. I can tell that mine in like a day or two's time, if I don't water it, which I'm gonna water it today, but this would start to wilt and become very, very flaccid, and it will scream across the room at me to come and water me. But some of the other ones might also just brown up a little bit, like the more stringy ones, like the Pilea glauca and the Pilea depressa. If those ring a bell, I don't think I have them in my home, so I won't be able to show examples of them for you guys today, but a little bit more of a intermediate houseplant, by no means an advanced houseplant. These wouldn't be so prevalent on the market if they weren't easy enough to grow. But I get excited every time I walk into like a big box store and they seemingly have like 6 different varieties of Pilea. There's really some really cool ones out there with some really different colored foliage that you're probably not used to seeing. Some of them are even more on like the brown and blackish side, where they practically look like they were fried and are dead, but they are very much alive. So a lot of character with this group of houseplants, and like I said like 6 times already, it's such an inexpensive group of houseplants, and they just deserve way more attention because they are so cool. But if you are looking for more woodlandish boho houseplants, this is definitely one to try, and they are not difficult to find. And if you feel like you haven't seen them before, it's probably because you just haven't noticed them, because they do kind of look like weeds. This one literally looks like mint. My nephew came over recently and he thought that it was mint and he almost ate it. So yeah, think about that. It's non-toxic, so nothing to worry about. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up here for today's video. 6 essential houseplants, in my opinion, for achieving boho vibes in your home. I would like to continue this. I can talk about tropical vibes and desert vibes and all those fun things, but I wanted to start off with talking about boho plants because they're my favorite kinds of plants. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at phillyfoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.